It's really great to be here. For everyone listening, I'm Litt from KCRW, and we are joined by Mr. Tom Jones. Thank you, Sir Tom Jones. Should I call you Sir Tom?
If you want to, you just call me.
Sir Tom.
Call me Tom.
Thank you so much for coming.
Don't call me late for breakfast. I know it's an old line, but
I know, that's what my dad says.
no, it's.
I'm just giving you a hard time. Yes. I'm so happy you're here. We're 2 days off the U.S. release of your album, Long Lost Suitcase, and you've just written your autobiography, Over the Top and Back.
Yes.
What made you write your autobiography? Has it been in the works for a really long time?
Yeah. I mean, I've been in the business for over 50 years now, and I'm 75 years old.
No.
I can't. Yeah. I can't believe it, so I'm 3/4 home from the start to the end. And I wish I was 18 again. I mean, it's just...
Listen, you are.
Well, thank you.
One of the things I loved about reading the book, and by the way, I so recommend this to all of you. It's such a wonderful read, and it was so interesting hearing about your young life, especially, and you referenced it up here a minute ago, talking about the Long Lost Suitcase and the songs from your youth. There were so many influences you had, and I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit, about some of your earliest influences, Bill Haley and the Comets, or Jerry Lee Lewis. Or
yes. Well, before, I mean, when I was very young, I would be listening to the BBC radio, because that's the only radio we had. And then Radio Luxembourg, which was coming out of Germany, late at night. So we would listen to, and I've always been interested in American roots music. Whether it's gospel, country, blues, rhythm and blues, like that. And so Mahalia Jackson, she used to, I heard her sing on the radio. And I went to a Presbyterian chapel, and we used to sing a song called The Old Rugged Cross. And when I heard Mahalia Jackson sing it, I thought, how come we're not singing it like that? So I did,
in church?
In church. Well, chapel. It was a chapel. And then in school, so I suppose, black gospel singers and blues singers were rubbing off on me without really realizing it. I mean, I can't think of anywhere else that it could have come from. But I was in school, and I sang the Lord's Prayer, and the teacher said to me, "Why are you singing this like a Negro spiritual?" And I said, "I didn't know that I was. I mean, first of all, I don't know what you mean." And so...
How old were you?
Oh, my God, 6 or 7, something like that. And yeah. So this is what was happening, you see. And they got all the school out, because apparently it sounded so different from the other kids singing that the teacher said, wait a minute, I've got to get the whole school together. We get in the assembly hall and sing it again. Because they couldn't quite believe it. So these things...
And you kept... Because one of the things I was sort of intrigued by... Well, gosh... I have about 25 questions to ask you, but one of the things I was intrigued by was it seemed like you didn't really realize that was the direction you were going to go to sing. You had other jobs, and you were,
yeah. Well,
but it sort of somehow didn't dawn on you for a while that was what you should do. Other than singing in pubs or... Yeah,
well, when I was a small child, and I would sing at weddings and birthdays, because I come from a large family, a lot of aunties and uncles and cousins, so... As time was going on, they were getting married. And then the people that they were marrying were not of our family. So they would come, and they'd hear me sing for the first time, because all my family knew how I could sing. And so I remember being in a cousin's house after the reception, and I sang, and this old chap was there, and he had a flat cap on, because the coal miners, they used to wear these caps. And he took his cap off, and he threw it on the floor, and he said, "Hey, this kid should not be singing for nothing," So they all started putting money in the cap then. And I went, wow, this is something. So then I had to take my cousins, the younger ones, to the movies that night. And then I had to spend the money that I'd made. My mother said, "Now take the girls to the, and you got the money to do it, so you treat them all." I said, "Okay, ma'am." So anyway, so that was that. So it started there. And then, he said, this chap, he said, you'll be a star when you grow up. You have star quality. And I thought, wow, I'm going to be a star when I grow up. But then, of course, when when you realize that life is not that simple, it started to sort of take a back seat for a minute, because then I got married at 16, you know. Yeah, my girlfriend became pregnant, you know, and so we had this big discussion at home. And my mother and everybody, you know, like the family comes in and they're, ooh, I don't know about this, you know. And Linda, who became my wife, we were sitting in the corner, you know, we were so wrapped up in one another. She was just 16 and I was almost 17. And my mother said, look, we're trying to decide what's going to happen to these kids. And look at them, they're not even taking any notice of us, which was quite true. Yes. So my mother said, let's not stand in the way, you know. And she's pregnant, let's not, you know. And in those days, you see, in 1957, it was a big deal to have a child out of wedlock, you know. So my mother said, why do that? Because they'll only get married anyway. You know, you can see it. They will, once they're old enough to make their own decision, they get married. So why stop them now? And that was it. So I got married young, but that gave me more determination. You know, because some people say, well, did it stop you? No, it didn't stop me.
Well, you had a wife and a child to look after. And
yeah, so I wanted to, you know, to become a successful singer. And I was working in a paper mill at the time, so I had to hold down this job because I was getting paid. I was a teenager, but they were giving me, you know, the full wages. So I thought, well, I'll hold this until I'm 21. Then I can, you know, get money elsewhere, you know, as an adult. And so that's when I got into singing in earnest then. I got with a band and I started singing around the clubs and everything in Wales. So.
You talked in the book about, and I think everybody here in this audience is an interesting group because everybody's here because they're music fans, and probably a large number of you are record collectors. And I loved reading about you being a record collector and going to the record store that had the speakers that played out onto the street, and hearing, you know, Rock Around the Clock, and
Rock Around the Clock. I was working in a glove factory. I was an apprentice glove cutter. That was the first job that I had.
I'm going backwards now a little bit.
Well,
I'm getting it all of it at work.
I left school when I was 15, you know, in 1955. And so I'm working in this glove factory, and they used to play the radio all day in factories. That's what they do, you know, to keep the people happy. And I heard this Rock Around the Clock came on. And I thought, my God, what is that? I mean, that's tremendous. And you got to think about the time. You know, if you play it now, you know, but I still love to listen to it, though. And then they did Blackboard Jungle, you know, and they used that as the title song because it represented the youth. You know, this is what we were listening to. The other stuff was sort of, you know, we were into rock and roll, big time. And Bill Haley kicked it off, and then, of course, closely followed by Elvis Presley, and then closely followed by Jerry Lee Lewis, you know. So when I heard a whole lot of shaking from this little speaker outside this record shop, because everybody was going, wow, Elvis Presley, man, he's a freak. You know, he's this young guy, a good-looking guy, white guy, you know, singing like a black person. And I said, well, just where he comes from. I'm sure of it. You know, he's from Mississippi. I mean, God. So I said, but there's got to be other people. You know, he can't be the only one. And then Jerry Lee Lewis, you know, with a whole lot of shaking. So then it all sort of started to build up, and I thought, I've got to do this. I mean,
And then later you ended up meeting. And working with.
Yeah.
Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis Presley.
Elvis Presley. I met Elvis. I came to America in '65. I did some Ed Sullivan shows in New York, and because It's Not Unusual came out in January in Britain, and it was #1 by March the 1st. You know, that's how fast it went. And then it got into the top 10 in America, you know, in the spring of '65. So then they wanted me to do an Ed Sullivan show. So I came over, and I did a lot of Ed Sullivan shows in '65 because he liked me, thank God. And so then all of a sudden, television went to color. So we came out to Los Angeles because they couldn't transmit in New York in color. They had to come to LA, the show. So I came here, and then I went to Paramount Studios to talk about a song for a movie, which never materialized. But anyway, when I was there, they said, Elvis Presley is filming today, and he would like to meet you. I said, really? I mean, I didn't even know he knew I existed, you know. And this is I'm only in like months. You know, this is from January, and this was only, well, it was September by the time I got to meet Elvis.
Right, but
it
it's
was all in
less than a
'65.
year.
Yes. And I saw him in the Paramount Studios, and he was doing a movie. He was in a helicopter, you know, a fake helicopter. And he came out, and he was walking towards me, and he was saying, I had a song out then called With These Hands. It was a big ballad, beautiful song. And Elvis was walking towards me going, with these hands, I will cling to you. And I thought, wow, you know. And when I used to sing in the pubs and clubs in Wales, right? Because I had a lot of, you know, fans and a lot of people and a lot of friends that I grew up with, you know. And I said to them one time, you know, because I sang an Elvis Presley song in a pub. And they said, wow, you sing that great. You know, everybody was like, thank you. I said, I'll meet Elvis one day. And they said, Tom, you're great, but please. You know what I mean? You know, please. This is South Wales here, you know what I mean? And I said, I know, but I will. I just had this feeling. And so when he was walking towards me singing With These Hands, I could see all these guys' faces. You know, I could see them all. And I'm looking and going, see, told you. You know, they weren't there, but they were in my mind, you know. And I told Elvis that. I said, I always thought I would meet you. And we became friends, you know, and then...
Yeah, you did.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
for many, many years.
So he was saying, how do you sing like that? And I said, well, listening to people like you know, I mean, you're a big influence on me. And he said, yeah, but I was brought up in Mississippi, you know, I went to black gospel churches. You know, what's it like in Wales? I said, not really, you know, I mean, we sing, you know, we do sing hymns and everything, you know, but not like, you know, the gospel that you were listening to. But it was rubbing off on me, you see, when I was listening to it on the radio. So I got all my information musically from the radio. Right. And he was knocked out with that, you know, because he felt that I had something that was different.
Well, you were always attracted to the roots and blues and gospel and R&B, and that was...
But Elvis, you know, I mean, Elvis had listened to the British rock bands, you know, and he wasn't that crazy for them. You know, anyway, I mean, it's the truth. So,
Wasn't a big Stones fan?
No. And the Beatles, and you know, I mean, they're great big bands, you know, I mean, but it didn't impress Elvis. But I must say that I did, and that's the truth, you know. So that coming from Elvis Presley was a huge compliment. I mean, it's unbelievable to me. And then we became friends, you know, and it was tremendous. And I'm glad that I lived at the same time as Elvis Presley, you know, because I got a chance to meet him. And he didn't meet many entertainers. He didn't. But he wanted to meet me, and we got together, and it was tremendous. The time I spent with Elvis Presley is the best musical experience for me ever, because to meet an icon like that, you know, somebody that you really, really like, you know, and admire, you know, because without Elvis Presley, there wouldn't have been rock and roll. You know, it wasn't. He started this thing in a certain way. There were rhythm and blues records before this, you know, and blues records, but not quite like the way he did it. You know what I mean? He brought the whole thing together, the country and the blues, you know, and it came out like that. I mean, they were very scared when he signed, and they were going to put out Heartbreak Hotel, you know, which is just a rhythm section. And in those days, there were big bands. And like the guy that signed him was sweating on it, you know. He said, well, you know, and all the executives at the record company said, are you sure about this? You know what I mean? It's like simple song as far as they were concerned. Well, they put it out, and the world went berserk. You know, even more so than Rock Around the Clock. You know, Heartbreak Hotel was like, boom. So it's fantastic. So I was thrilled, you know, to meet him and know him.
Well, and actually, I'm skipping ahead of 20 million other things I want to talk to you about, because I know everybody's here to listen to the music, but if I'm not mistaken, you're going back into your next set of music with Elvis Presley Blues.
Yes.
Am I right about that?
Yes, I heard this song, Gillian Welch
yes.
wrote it.
Yeah, we're big Gillian Welch fans here.
I'm from Nashville, you know, she writes out of Nashville. And so I heard this song, and I thought, I have to do this song. So I tried it. Ethan said, let's try it. But we did it, first of all, like she did, more or less, you know.
Yeah.
And I said, we need to do something else with it. And he said, well, let's just leave it for the minute. You know, this was about 3 years ago, I think. And then earlier this year, he said, why don't we go into the studio, just you and myself. I'll play guitar and you sing it. And then there was another song as well. He was a friend of mine. He said, I think we could do a better job. So I said, okay, let's do it. So they were the last 2 songs that we did for this album. And it's just Ethan Johns and myself. And the result is, to me, I played it to Priscilla Presley, you know, the Elvis Presley Blues.
Yes. And what did she think?
She said it's a moving tribute to Elvis Presley. And I said, well, that's what I meant it to be, you know, because I've told funny stories about Elvis, you know.
There's some in the book.
Yeah, and they're funny stories, but I never meant to try to make him look silly or anything. That was him.
Yeah.
You know, he had this wonderful character, and we got really close. You know, we were in the bathroom together. You know, I was in the shower, and he was, you know, really, but you'll have to read about it in the book. But it's hilarious.
It's really good.
Yeah. But, I mean, I didn't mean it. I didn't say it to sort of put him down. The man was unbelievable. You know, and just to be in the bathroom with him, you know, and he didn't care. You know, I mean, so I thought, well, this man must really like me, you know, not in a peculiar way.
No, but he felt
man
he
to
felt
man.
close to you. Absolutely.
Yes, we had a man bonding thing in the bathroom. So I don't think 2 men can get closer than that.
It doesn't sound like it.
Heterosexual men, you know. But he must have felt so comfortable that he wasn't bothered, you know. And it was a lovely moment for me. That night was tremendous. No, really, it was something. Well, yeah, okay, I'll tell you the story quick.
And then I promise we'll play music, but
Okay.
this is too good to not actually
Okay.
say.
So Elvis heard this song, and he was singing at the Hilton, and I was at Caesar's Palace. So he would stay over, you know, we'd do a month, and it'd overlap with what I was doing. And then, so he would come to the shows every night. And then one night, I came off the stage, and he said, I got this song, man. And I said, okay. And he said, you're going to love it, man. I said, yeah, but I got to jump in the shower, you know, because I'm like dripping, you know, because I used to sweat a lot then when I was younger. So anyway, so I was in the shower, right, and I'm washing my hair, and it's a big shower, and the shower head is there, and the door is there, right? It's very close to where the shower head was. So I'm washing my hair like this, and I hear, you know, and I mean, it's in a huge shower, so you got this big echo on it, you know what I mean? And I thought, I'm going nuts. I'm hearing Elvis Presley in the shower, you know. So I got the soap out of my eyes, and his face is right there. You know, he's over the shower door, right close to me, you know, going, well, and I said, Elvis, you know, you sound great. And he did too. But I said, look, you know, could I just finish off in the shower, you know, and then I'll come out, you know. So by the time I did, and I got out, Elvis had used the bathroom. You know, I mean, he had done whatever.
As
like
Elvis
this.
might do.
So, yeah, and he had a North Beach leather outfit on, and I used to wear them myself. You know, they were unlined leather things. So when I got out there, you know, he had finished doing whatever he was doing, but his pants were still around his ankles. So I said, but I'm completely naked anyway. So I said, Elvis, I said, your pants. And he said, what? I said, your pants. What? I said, Elvis, they're still around. He was standing up, you know, but he said, Red, you know, because he had the Red West, Sonny West, and Red West, they're bodyguards. So Red come busting through the door because he shouted for him. And he said, my pants, man. So Red West was on his knees trying to get these, you know, I mean, they were tight, I got to admit. You know, because I used to wear them as well. And he was like shuffling them up Elvis's legs. And Red looked at me and he said, if you told this story, they would never believe you. And I said, well, believe me, I will tell it. And they will believe me. Because it's true.
And you're so wonderful to come out for KCRW tonight. I can't tell you how
I-
much we appreciate it. Right? It's a special night for us.
Well, it's great music. You know, I love the station. I love what they do. You know what I mean? We need more stations like this, you know, to play, not just always, you know, pop, top 40 radio. You know, there's loads of those. You know what I mean? And if you want to tune into them, fair enough. But if you want to listen to a eclectic, wow, that's a big word. You know, eclectic. They play all kinds of things, and that's what keeps music alive. So, and that's why I'm here tonight.
Well, thank you so much.